Let's do a screenshot real quick.
Okay.
You should be worried, I guess. You should be worried. It's concerns. Okay. Or
hold on.
Yeah, concern, I think, is
All right, I got it.
All right. Nah, I don't.
Dude, if you
like
knew
how a goofy face,
if you knew how perfectly I was mimicking the worried emoji there, you would be so impressed. Literally Google worried emoji and balance and look at what I just did.
Dude. Okay. Why are you mimicking an emoji? You're a real human.
They're teaching me how to make a worried face. I'm like a sociopath who doesn't know how to emote.
Yeah, this is not fucking, what is that Jake Gyllenhaal movie? This is not that shit, man.
Maybe I am. Maybe I'm out here watering my plants and laughing and pretending to have conversations, to learn how to be a person.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. We are only a few games into the NBA season, and damn, we have a lot to talk about. We are going to start with the Knicks this time, who have had a very interesting 3 games. And then after the Knicks, we're going to dive into the Lakers early season, who, speaking of interesting, they might be the most purely interesting team in the NBA right now. I don't know. There's a few contenders. These two teams who are both going through sort of, Geoff and I were talking about this, sort of going through identity changes for different reasons. For the Knicks, largely due to roster turnover. For the Lakers, obviously, their big coaching shift. And Geoff, I feel like a lot of people come here to Hot Hand Theory to hear things that they're not hearing elsewhere and to get a different perspective on the game. I really don't think they'll be disappointed with this one. I think we're going to cover a lot of stuff here. How are you feeling, Geoff?
I'm good. I was like cleaning up my tabs, as we prepare to do this episode. And I had to close the tab where I was Googling how to make a worried face. So that made me laugh as you were giving your intro, just like, teaching myself how to emote and be a human. But I'm doing great. It's been a great day. It's been a good week despite the slow Knicks start. Always happy to have NBA back. So just excited to hop into this with you and discuss this stuff.
And I have to clarify, or I have to at least state for the audience, you were literally learning how to make emotions from emojis, not from actual humans expressing the emotions, but from cartoons doing this, trying to emulate humans expressing the emotions.
I was studying them all. I was balancing it out. I was being a good human.
You looked at 7 different ones and then saw the emoji and was like, this one looks most realistic. I'll go with this one.
Well, I thought it was the most cartoonish. I thought it would be the best, for a thumbnail. I thought, if anything, it would.
Listen, for our audience, I'm using a clip of Geoff's emotion from the thumbnails. Let me know in the comments if it looks like a real human emotion or it looks like a cartoon emotion.
Yeah, and click that subscribe button if you haven't.
Yeah, shoehorn right in there with the please click the subscribe button as well.
Yeah.
Grade A work. I genuinely mean it. All right, let's talk about the Knicks. The Knicks are early into this new era with their roster. We're seeing some early challenges, which is not to be unexpected, but we could potentially be looking at just growing pains, but it could potentially be something more. You and I, like I said, Geoff, talked off the pod about the identity aspect. What's this team's identity? I know I believe, and I've always believed that based on their personnel, this is a space it out, get to the hoop, shoot a ton of threes. That should be their identity. But the Knicks don't seem to have bought into that necessarily. Geoff, do you agree or disagree with that sentiment? What are your general thoughts about this?
This is tough because it's been 3 games. I think there probably should have been more expectation to start the season that Bridges and Towns, and don't forget, they're trying to work Josh Hart into the starting lineup. I know he played a lot of minutes regardless last season, but that's not just 100% seamless. There's stuff they have to figure out there too. They are trying to fit 3 new players into a starting lineup. I think there was an expectation that it would be seamless and just instant because of the way that Bridges and Towns and Hart get their impact. It's mostly additive. It's mostly, especially in this paradigm with Jalen Brunson, it was going to come off the ball and they were going to be doing a lot of things that didn't require learning a system, for example. Tom Thibodeau's system isn't known to be overly complex, at least offense. I do think defensively, that's a different story, but we're talking offense right now. I think that was another reason why people would be like, oh, Towns is just going to come in. Yeah, he's just going to set a lot of screens. He's going to shoot threes. You know, he doesn't have to do much more than that. But I think we're seeing someone who's really trying to figure out how to fit in. With that being said, I think there are some concerns. And yeah, I don't think you're way off base here in so far as them finding an identity. I think we have to talk about those things because look, it's what's happened. I don't think you can just shy away from it because it's only been 3 games. We're not supposed to just sit here and wait for 40 games to be like, oh, now we can talk about it because there's been the appropriate sample size. You talk about what you've seen and then you adjust. And what I've seen on the court is a team that is still trying to play a way that maybe doesn't fit the new players. I think that you're seeing guys fill into roles that players from past teams were filling. And when you look back on some of the conversations we had this summer, one of the primary concerns we had was, well, okay, Mikal Bridges is this player who maybe in other situations would be better than a guy like Dante DiVincenzo. But given the role that Tibbs wants from a shooting guard, a 3-and-D type who's just going to shoot whenever he gets the ball, going to attack these closeouts and create positive offense, how big an upgrade is Mikal Bridges really going to be over Dante DiVincenzo? And so I think one of the interesting things that the Knicks have to look forward to as they move ahead is, are they going to keep trying to pigeonhole a guy like Mikal Bridges into the Dante DiVincenzo role, or are they going to make small adjustments to maybe get more out of him and play more to his strengths? Is that for the best of the team? These are questions that they have to answer. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think there's something there.
I think there's definitely something there. Those are questions they have to answer. I think they have to answer it with a lot of guys, honestly. And I think, obviously the big glaring one is Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns is averaging almost 12 defensive rebounds per 75, which is 99th percentile in the NBA. And only averaging 2.63 attempts per 75, which is 12th percentile in the NBA. I don't understand if they're trying to make Karl-Anthony Towns be like a Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein type player. It's very confusing to me, but he's producing similar kind of output. Obviously, those guys wouldn't even take 2.63s per 75, but 2.63s per 75 is like nothing. Not for Karl-Anthony Towns. The guys should be up there in the 90th percentile in 3-point attempts, especially playing at the 5. So my concern for the Knicks, after the Bridges trade, after the Towns trade, I stated this in many different places. I said it here. I said this on the Locked On Knicks podcast with Gavin, was whether the Knicks coaching staff was best positioned to optimize the roster that they constructed. I got a ton of flack for that. I'll get flack in this, for this one too. I just think over the first 3 games, we're seeing that those concerns were well-founded. To me, approach is always more important than results. And it's not the outcomes that I'm really concerned about necessarily. It is the approach that they've taken. And I'll share some data, with you in the audience, and then I'll say what I think about it. The Knicks currently have the 3rd best offensive rating in the NBA through with a 3-game sample. 120.8 points per 100 possessions. Like I said, 3rd best offensive rating. Some sites will have different ratings. I'm using Cleaning the Glass for this because it filters out garbage time. So just to clarify, if there's a discrepancy, early season discrepancy, that's the reason why, most likely. They also had the 2nd worst defensive rating at 124.4 points per 100. Again, this is a 3-game sample, so it's going to be skewed by like outlier performances. The Boston game is dragging their defense way down. Without that, it'd be 6th best. In my opinion, the way they approach the Boston game, playing cat in a drop every time down, conceding threes to one of the best 3-point teams like ever assembled in the history of the game of basketball, I think is a concerning approach. I don't think that really belies a deep understanding of like how you should approach defense, how you should approach offense in the modern era. So that's one thing. But also, like I said, 121 points per 100 possessions sounds like their offense is great. That's cool. They're doing great. let's look a little bit deeper into it. The Knicks are actually very last in the NBA in pace. It's not even close. They're 2 possessions per 100 slower than the next slowest team, which is the Miami Heat. They should not be dead deep last in pace with the shooting and the up-tempo team that they could potentially put out on the court. They're also the 4th worst team in the NBA in three-point shooting frequency. Less than 32% of their shots come from three. They are middle of the pack in frequency of shots coming at the rim. And they are 5th in the league in frequency of shots coming from the mid-range. 7th from the short mid-range, 8th from the long mid-range. However, how do we add all this up to get to 121 points per 100 possessions, good for 3rd best offensive rating in the NBA? They are shooting 54.1% on all mid-range shots, number 1 in the NBA by a large margin. The next closest team is shooting 50.5% on mid-range shots. The team that led the league last year, the Pacers, shot 48.7% from the mid-range. The Knicks are shooting 54.1% from the mid-range. This is not sustainable offense. People keep messaging me and saying, look at their offensive rating, that everything's going well. They're scoring really effectively. This is absolutely not modern offense. This is not sustainable. You do not take the vast majority of your shots from the mid-range and hope to shoot 55% from it. It doesn't work. It won't work over 82 games. The skill of their players is currently bailing out a flawed approach to the game, especially given the makeup of this team. You have really excellent mid-range shooters like Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby is shaping up to be one, obviously Jalen Brunson. This is not, you can't have Phoenix Suns East. This is not going to be a mid-range, a stacked team of guys who are all going for middies and let's bring in DeMar DeRozan and let's bring in Brandon Ingram and that'll be the lineup and we'll all shoot 55% from 2. This is a problem. Now, they can adjust it. It's 3 games in. It doesn't mean I'm saying they can't change it. They can't change course. Of course they can. But this is an issue because it shows that a lack of understanding for what makes a productive offense and an effective offense in the modern NBA, which is getting up a lot of threes. And if you're not getting threes, you're getting to the rim. This is doing something in the middle that is not a sustainable and effective way to approach the game. And that's my main concern right now.
Yeah, that was really eloquent. Just really well said. I think it's interesting to try and break down the X's and O's of how they're supposed to get more 3-pointers, because I think everyone agrees they need to shoot more 3-pointers. I've seen it across every discussion. Everyone's like, just they got to shoot more threes. And I think even the players, on some level, I think the players and the front office and the coaching staff agree that maybe they wouldn't agree to your liking, but I do think that they agree if you showed them they're last in the league in 3-point attempts. I think if somebody was like, hey, do you think you need to shoot more threes? That most people would be like, yeah, we probably need to shoot more threes. So the next step would be figuring out what they're supposed to do, because it's not like they're out there not trying to shoot threes. I think they're reacting to how the game is being played, and the shots they're taking are a result of what's happening on the court. I don't think they're making an active effort to shoot more from the mid-range. Do you think that? I think they're
not making an active effort to shoot more threes. and I think there are ways we can talk about the ways they could go about doing that, but I don't think you can say they're trying to shoot more threes and it's just not possible. I don't buy that at all. I think they would like to shoot more three theoretically. I think everyone agrees with that. I think if you showed Tibbs a sheet of paper that said this is your number of 3-point attempts, he's going to be like, we should get that up. Like, I think that they would like to, but there's a want to, and there's a we must do it and we will do it. They're not doing it, meaning that they don't have enough of a will to do it, in my opinion. I think there are ways they could go about it. We'll talk about those too, but I don't think it's a sufficient desire to shoot more threes. I don't think the Celtics would ever be in the situation of shooting a bunch of mid-range shots and then we say, well, we want to get up more threes if we can. No, they would. They just would, because you need to.
Yeah, but that's kind of a chicken and egg thing. This is going to be a really interesting discussion because I feel pretty differently than you. I think that the Celtics would never be in the situation because they're constantly creating advantages that the Knicks aren't constantly creating. So it's kind of, I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but it's kind of easy to say that. It's easy to say, yeah, the Celtics would never be in this situation. Of course they wouldn't, because they play a 5-out and they have 3 guys in Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, who, when the motion starts, they're able to create these advantages that force collapses and force double teams. And they have this methodology in their head of threes and shots at the rim are the most valuable shots. We need to create those. And that is the domino. But the first domino is having the roster, the players available to them to create the advantages necessary. If defenses were able to, if you created a world where defenses were able to stop Tatum, Brown, and White from creating advantages without a second defender coming, I don't think the Celtics would just be launching contested three. Maybe they would. Maybe Mazzulla's that type of coach. Maybe to your point, they would. But I think that they would ultimately settle for the best shot that they could get. And more often, I think those shots would fall inside the three-point line. I just don't think that a defense is able to stop them from getting these shots. Whereas I think that defenses are having an easier time stopping the Knicks from getting the shots that they maybe want.
Yeah, so I anticipate this response from you or anyone I have this discussion with. And so I guess my question would be then, is the suggestion that the Knicks don't have the personnel to possibly create more threes? Is that the issue?
I don't think that's the issue. No, I think it's more nuanced. I don't think it's just this binary like 100% thing. I don't. No,
I'm not saying it's 100%. I'm saying.
I don't think it's impossible.
I'm saying they could generate more threes. Is my claim, and then I'm hearing, well, they would like to, but they're not able to. I'm pushing back on that and saying they could, and if you agree that they have the personnel to do it, then it's not appropriate to say that they just can't do it, right? Like I guess that's.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm not saying they can't do it. I just think it's more complicated than. Well, if they really wanted to, they would just do it. I think there's multiple prongs here, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think if they really wanted to, they would. I do think that, because one reason I think that is, if you want to shoot threes, let's say I'm building a team, I'd like to shoot more threes. I think that's really important. One way I could do that is by having everyone on the court be able to shoot threes.
I think
that would increase my potential to shoot more threes. Now, if that was my priority, if that was the most important thing to me, and I said that's really critical, or one of the most important things, and I said that's really critical, would I not leverage away other things for the possibility of being able to shoot more threes? Like, could I not do that? Could I not make that trade-off if it was more important to me?
And for people out there who might think XJ is being a little blasphemous or whatever, Josh Hart is in the 39th percentile in three-point attempts per 75. That's not great, but that's, I think, better than either me or XJ expected going into the season. He's averaging double the three-point attempts of Karl Anthony Towns per 75 possessions. That's awful. That there's no defense of that. You have to just actively go out of your way to, and maybe we go back and watch the film a little bit and be like, all right, Karl, why didn't you shoot this three? I'm sure there are individual examples of Towns trying to fit into this new scheme, being a little bit more passive than he was in Minnesota. I think that's human nature. I think that's just natural. I think Towns just shooting more when he's slightly contested will solve this problem. Not solve it. Will come closer to solving this problem. But this is a macro issue. This isn't solved at the margins. To XJ's point, this is an issue that needs to be a foundational principle. And I sent this message to XJ last night. The things that Josh Hart does really well, the pace, the rebounding, the stuff, he was amazing in last night's game. He was so good. He was everywhere. He played probably to the best of his ability on a hurt ankle before he hurt himself. It was an amazing Josh Hart game. But the things that Hart does well, they need to be a luxury now. They can't be the founding principle of this team anymore, because that's how you end up with this bloated offensive rating that's based on sustainable principles. When you do a thing like trade for Karl Anthony Towns and trade for Mikal Bridges, who's supposed to be, a good shooter from the perimeter, there needs to be a new foundation behind what the principles that this team is built upon.
Yeah, and I like that framing. I think I want to just clarify. So when I bring up the Celtics, it's not because the Knicks have the same exact personnel or the same kinds of guys who can create advantages and as a result generate three-point attempts. My point is more like from a principle standpoint, from an approach standpoint. They start from the perspective of threes are critical. We're going to get them up. that is going to maximize our spacing, that is going to allow us to get to the rim a lot easier, that is going to allow everything to flow much more naturally from an offensive standpoint. That's a principle that comes from messaging from the highest level throughout the organization, from the top down. That's what they espouse. Now, if that is being espoused in the Knicks organization and guys are just not shooting the threes, or just like Towns is like, sorry, that guy was kind of closing out on me. I know I'm 7 feet tall, but he was closing out. He was like 7 feet away from me, and I just felt like, no, I could just drive by him. Or Bridges or OG or whoever, that we think is the reason they're not taking threes. I mean, maybe Deuce McBride was coached by Missoula on the side during the offseason, and then he came into this, system and said, oh, I know I need to jack up threes, but like they need to do it. Like I hate to be so reductive in that way, but like, yes, the coaching staff needs to draw up and generate ways to get threes. In my opinion, the easiest way to do that is to insert Deuce McBride into the starting lineup, which we're probably going to see now, under unfortunate circumstances. And I just think that they need to do it. The players need to be more aggressive for shooting threes. They need to hunt threes. They need to attack and get threes. The coaching staff needs to operate and create threes the best that they can, whether they're slightly contested or wide open. They need to get more attempts. And I think that's just what we have to see. And of course, there are ways we can talk about they can do that, but I just believe strongly that needs to happen.
Yeah, I'm just a mini rant here. One of my least favorite things in the world is when somebody is critical of anything, whether this is in politics or business or sports, and somebody deflects by saying, well, what would you do better? And it's like, dude, I don't need to be better at this person's job to understand that they're not doing a good job right now. Like, I don't need a solution. I don't know, this guy hires a criminal to run a lemonade stand. I don't need to come up with a better plan than I can just tell you that the hiring of the criminal for the lemonade stand was a bad idea. I don't need a better plan. So I just want to push back against that framing and say that XJ shouldn't need to map out how the Knicks are going to better create threes to understand that them not creating threes is a bad thing. With that being said, I do want to clarify your perspective a little bit here. Do you think that if you just plopped the Knicks starting lineup in Boston with Missoula, that they would be shooting threes at the rate Boston is right now?
That's a tough question. If you give me a binary, I'm not sure, but I know it would be significantly more than what they're shooting now. Yeah, I don't know if they would reach what actually Boston is doing. That's tough.
So what do you think? What do you think they would do if they were coached by Missoula and Missoula was doing what he was in Boston, but Anunoby and Bridges and the non-Brunson players weren't creating the advantages even off of closeouts that White and Tatum and Brown were? And we haven't even gotten to this point. I think Brunson's kind of a limited passer. I think that his size limits him. I think that when Brunson creates an advantage, even with the space, he's not capable of maximizing the space available to him except for creating his own shot. I think that was kind of under-discussed in the offseason. So I guess my question to you would be, what would the solution be? I don't think, to rephrase, I don't think you need a solution. I'm just curious if you have one, what Boston would do. If Brunson creating these advantages didn't lead to more threes for his teammates because he wasn't seeing all the passing angles, it was just leading to more efficient scoring for him. And OG Anunoby and Bridges weren't Jalen Brown and Derek White insofar as running pick and roll and attacking closeouts. Are they just shooting more contested threes, or what do you think they would do to get more threes up?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's an important question. So I would say first, the reason why it helps me clarify my perspective. So the reason why I'm talking about Boston is not because of the personnel. It's because of the approach, right? So they know their purpose, their intention is to be aggressive from the 3-point line, right? Like that's something that's important from a coaching standpoint, from an organizational standpoint. So I think instilling that changes the way that the players behave, right? Like if you don't take a wide open or an open three, I think that you'll get a lot of criticism from the coach and from your teammates. That's a problem. You can't do it. It's not acceptable. When you are Josh Hart and you maybe miss a swing pass to Karl Anthony Towns, who's wide open, above the break, That's a problem. You're messing up. You are not doing our principles. You are missing guys who are open from three. You have to, if you're Karl Anthony Towns and you're passing up a three because a guy is too close to you, that's a problem. That's not okay. It's not acceptable. It's not, all right, well, you were looking for a better shot, Karl. No, you got to shoot that shot. You have to. So that's what I mean by an approach standpoint. So that's one thing. Another thing is the pace they cannot be last in pace. They cannot be last in pace. If you start your possession so late in the clock, you don't have an opportunity to create more potential open threes. You are left with of course you're going to take the mid-range shot because you have 7 seconds left on the clock. And if you don't, to start over, you don't have time to generate a better shot. So you have to take that shot. You're forced to take that shot. You have to go faster. You can't be 95th or a pace of 95 possessions per 100 or a game. It doesn't work.
You know what's interesting about this part of the conversation is you make so many good points. Actually, it's a genius, by the way, people, if you don't know.
Dude, chill.
But one of the most illuminating things that you brought up last season during season 1 was when you talked about Indiana's pace, and you talked about how there was a misconception between what everybody thinks that because Indiana's a high-paced team, that means they're constantly in transition and they're getting like lots of fast break opportunities. People think about Obi Toppin leaking out. What made Indiana's offense so good last season was they were an elite half-court offense. People didn't realize that. They were the best half-court offense in the NBA. And people thought, oh, well, they're this fast-paced team. That must mean they're getting a lot of transition opportunities. No, they are shooting a lot early in the shot clock because they push the ball up the court to start their possessions, and then they're not wasting any time in early in the shot clock. If you watch the Knicks offense, they walk the ball up the court, except for Josh Hart, and seriously, it's only Josh Hart that's willing to push the ball. And then by the time they get the ball up the court, they do a lot of ancillary action. They pass the ball and then they pitch it back to Brunson. And by the time Brunson's ready to actually go with the primary action, there's 8 to 10 seconds left on the shot clock. There's only limited options to create a good shot. If the Knicks were to start the possession with 16, 18 seconds left on the shot clock, now when your primary action doesn't work, you don't have to immediately settle for a mid-range opportunity. You can give yourself a secondary look to create a three. These are things that really great offenses do. So I know that a natural tendency when you hear XJ say, oh, well, we need to start Deuce and also we need to up the pace. I know a natural tendency is going to be like, well, you can't have both those things. Josh Hart's the most valuable person to the fast breaks because he pushes the ball off the boards. You can't have both those things. Actually, yes, you can. You just need to start the offense earlier. You shouldn't. This is why I said earlier in the episode, the Josh Hart pushing of the pace and creating transition opportunities, that needs to be a luxury, not a foundational principle. The foundational principle needs to be starting the offense earlier so that you can create multiple good looks in the half court.
I think that was extremely well said. I'm so glad that you brought up the Pacers, analogy here. I think that that's totally right. It's not about increasing transition opportunities. It's about starting your offense faster. And the reason for that is you're forced to take the best shot available when you're getting late in the shot clock, as opposed to saying we can get a better shot if we reset and we try again. So you have fewer opportunities to generate this best shot that we're talking about, which is a shot at the rim or a 3-point shot. If you start so much slower, it's not about transition opportunities. And to be honest, Josh Hart is really good for getting your offense initiated more quickly. Like, he's just a faster player. He runs up the court if he's off the ball. If he brings the ball up by any chance that Brunson's not bringing it up, he pushes it up a lot quicker than Brunson will. But again, this is an approach thing, in my opinion. This comes from a coaching standpoint. This is not Brunson taking it upon himself and saying, I'm Jalen Brunson. I like to play slow. I'm gonna walk the ball up the court. Like, this is a concerted effort.
Let's be fair, though. It could be.
You think that Brunson?
I'm saying no. I'm saying it could be. There's a non-0% chance. It could be. He could just be more comfortable.
Feels so unlikely.
He could just be more comfortable with a methodical pace. That we have to be fair here to the coaching staff. It is possible.
It's possible. I for sure, you're right. I won't say that it's definitively not, Jalen Brunson taking it upon himself. That just feels so unlikely that, the coaching staff is telling him to push the ball up the court and he's just like, no, I'm going to walk it because I prefer it that way. Like, that feels so unlikely to me. But definitely.
I would agree with that. You did land on something about Josh Hart that I don't think gets enough praise, which is people are probably going to be shocked to hear that from me about Josh Hart, but he is like it, hate it, love it. He is himself. Like, he's coachable, but he's going to play his way. And I think that players probably need to start doing that a little bit more outside of the system, especially a guy like Jalen Brunson, if that's what's going on. If it's a principled effort by the team to scheme this way, to play slow, which is weird because Tibbs has always seemed to me to be very anti-variance. And for those who don't know, reducing the possessions in a game actually increases variance, even if you can control those possessions more. For an exaggerated example out there, people, if I was to play LeBron James one-on-one, I would have a better chance of winning in a game to 1 than a game to 100. I'm 0% to win in a game to 100, but if the game was to 1, there's a chance I win the coin flip for the ball. There's a chance I just chuck it up and it goes in. This is obvious. The games are higher variance if there's fewer possessions. When you're a great team like the Knicks, you want more possessions because you want there to be less variance in the game. Tibbs has always been anti-variance. He always wants to control as much as possible. You'd think he would want there to be more possessions in the game.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I understand why Tibbs. I think I understand. I'll say why Tibbs wants the game to be slower. He wants fewer turnovers. He wants to have more control over those possessions. He wants to make sure that the other team doesn't get to play at their tempo, at their pace. There's reasons that make sense theoretically. I just think the reasons to play faster are much stronger. So in one hand, I would say speed up the pace, speed up the tempo of the game, get the ball across half court, start your offensive actions a lot sooner. And then another, and again, I kind of highlighted this, but I just want to really drill down on it. I don't think you'll get fewer threes if you take out Josh Hart from the starting lineup and increase Deuce McBride, even if you change nothing else, because you're talking about just another player who is willing to take threes, whether they're contested, tough threes. The Knicks literally lost the best player, one of the best players in the league at being aggressive in shooting threes in Dante DiVincenzo. This is one of the most aggressive three-point shooters in the entire league last year in terms of his depth of shooting and his willingness to just jack them up. Deuce McBride is sort of emulating that. Not many players can get as close to DiVincenzo as possible, but Deuce McBride is the best hope that the Knicks have for that. This is a guy who's not passing up threes. He's not like, oh, this guy's closing out. Let me pump fake and then drive and then pull up for mid-range unless, there's no time on the clock. This is a guy who's shooting the three, and he needs to do that. He needs to be in the lineup. If that's something you want to do, if that's something that's really important to you is getting up a lot of threes, you put more three-point shooters out there, period. That's genuinely what I believe.
Yeah, and the other thing I think they can do is just run more Brunson Towns pick and roll. Yes. I'm sure you have the numbers somewhere. You could get the numbers, but it doesn't feel like they're running pick and rolls at a high enough rate. Look, I'm a little bit skeptical, and I think this is something that would have just bludgeoned the league 20, maybe even 10 years ago. Just the simple pick and roll when defenses weren't as advanced. I think that for the most part, defenses are advanced enough to the point where a simple Brunson Towns pick and roll isn't just going to create this flurry of Towns threes. I think that defenses will immediately recognize what the Knicks are trying to do and have third defenders hedging. But you force the defense to do that. We're talking about creating advantages. Maybe OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges aren't the pure advantage creators that the Knicks have had in the past, namely Julius Randle or even Emmanuel Quickley. But Brunson is, and defenses respect him as a scorer, and they respect Towns' shooting. And if you just pair the two together and have them be interactive, that's all you need. And the thing that befuddles me most about this, for the past 2 regular seasons, the Knicks have spammed 1-5 screen and roll with Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, right.
And we've been like, why don't we run more wing 1-3 pick and rolls and get different defenders on Brunson? Nobody cares about Mitchell Robinson and to a lesser extent Hartenstein on these rolls. That we have to diversify. finally they have a center who defenses care about. And they're like, you know what? Let's go. It's backwards. I don't understand. What's the thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to play Josh Hart in the starting lineup, why is he not involved in a ton of pick and rolls and with Towns spacing it out? I
think he should be the initiator more.
Well, yeah,
I totally agree another way.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I've always said that about Josh Hart. Because I think you put the ball in the hands of the guy who is the least threatening shooter. I think that's what we talked about with Amin Thompson at times and other guys like that. But
you can't rotate off of a non-shooter if he has the ball in his hands. They're not just going to leave him alone.
Right. Yes. So yeah.
Exactly. If you're a Knicks fan out there and you're watching these games, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, XJ.
No, you're good. You're good.
But watch you just have to watch this passive impact. It's so important because it's Mike Breen is counting Josh Hart's rebounds every single time he grabs a rebound. It's so hard to not create a bias. It's so hard to not create a bias in your head because literally you have all these things telling you, oh, Josh Hart's everywhere. He's getting these loose balls. Look, there's his 9th rebound of the game, and it's the first half. Every single thing is telling you that these little things add up. And you're just ignoring the very loud passive impact. And you just have to, every single time he doesn't have the ball in his hands and he is above the break or he is standing in the corner, watch what his defenders do and then watch the effect that has on his teammates' ability to create a good shot. This stuff adds up. And it's why when Josh Hart's on the court, he needs to have less passive impact because he doesn't provide it. He doesn't provide passive impact. They don't care when he's standing in the corner. They don't care when he's above the break. They will care if he has the ball in his hands because he's a good passer. He's a good passer. He's a great finisher at the rim. And if you try to ignore him with the ball in his hands, he's just going to get downhill and get to the basket. And if you try and hedge off somebody else, he's going to find that shooter better than Jalen Brunson would. And Jalen Brunson's a better shooter. So this works both ways. This is why actually brings up, you want to use Josh Hart in a more active impact role. You want to use him as a screener more and have Karl Anthony Towns standing above the break. There are all these ways to create more shots, and the Knicks just aren't doing them right now.
I think that was so beautifully said. You said that Josh Hart needs to be less in a passive impact role and more in an active impact role. I think that is absolutely how you get the best out of Hart on both ends, where you get the best of both worlds for Hart in terms of the chaos that he creates, his switchability defensively, his rebounding on both ends, and limit what he's taking away from your offense off the ball. That you get all of it if you put him in that kind of role. And I think there's so many things that they can do, in my opinion, and I'm not a film expert. I'm not a former coach. I understand the data to a deep extent. I will not buy the idea that there's nothing that the Knicks could do to generate more threes and that they've tried everything in the last 3 games and they're just doing the things that this personnel allows. I don't buy that whatsoever. Maybe 500 possessions of a 5-out spacing lineup in terms of Deuce McBride playing or Josh Hart being on the ball. Trying various things over, hundreds and hundreds of possessions, then you can bring me over to that side. Until then, I won't be there. Any last thoughts on this, Geoff, before we move to the Lakers?
No, I thought that was a good, exhaustive discussion. I'm curious to see how Brunson specifically moves forward. That's something that's something I'm going to be watching because I'm not worried. I'll never be worried about him as a scorer. What I am worried about is how he affects or drives a team's ceiling. Because I do think that the best offense is going to be a team that plays in space and leverages that space to create a flurry of good shots. And watching Brunson, I'm not going to say I'm worried, but there is a small concern to me that he just prefers the muck. He prefers to create contact. He prefers to operate inside the arc. And because of his size, he's actually limited in how team offense can create threes. I'm worried that if he's the driver of your offense, there's actually a lower ceiling to how many threes your offense can create on the whole.
I just want to say I think this is a really interesting perspective that you have. I haven't heard this anywhere else really in the way that you're articulating it. If this is actually mostly on Brunson and I'm kind of pointing my finger at the coaching staff more so, I will come on here and apologize and say I was totally wrong about that, because I can imagine a world in which the coaching staff is trying to best mold their offense to a way that suits their best offensive player in Jalen Brunson, and just trying to go in that direction, and that's actually what's restricting them. I could imagine that world. I don't think that is this world. I don't think so personally, but I can imagine it, and it'll be really interesting to watch. I think, Knicks fans, that's something to monitor, pay close attention to. If Geoff mentions something like this, it's something to keep on the lookout for. Another team that is going through, some identity shifts are the 3-1 Lakers. I'll say, I've watched a good amount of Lakers games, in terms of the amount of time I spend watching them. Obviously, I watch a ton of Charlotte Hornets. That's my actual new favorite team. But, I have watched a ton of Lakers games. It's very interesting basketball theater. It's not perfect. The offense looks better than last year, in my opinion. Geoff, you've been watching them very closely. What are your early thoughts about the Lakers?
I think that there are a lot of encouraging things about the Lakers. Going into the season, I would have found it hard to believe that they would be even in the second tier. I think you wouldn't have gotten me to believe that LeBron, who was awful against Phoenix last night, or when you hear this, it'll have been Monday night, but that was one of the worst regular season games I've ever seen him play. I thought it was cool that JJ yelled at him on the court in a way that I'm not sure a coach has ever yelled at him. I don't know if you saw that, but LeBron did the LeBron thing where if you don't, I don't know who out there is listening to this and doesn't watch a ton of LeBron. It's interesting to me how he's basically like a big Julius Randle who's made it work because he's so skilled. Like he's actually such a suboptimal version of a basketball player who's just so unbelievably good. It's like, fuck, we got to play this way. It's so wild to me. And it's why he probably has taken the longest of any Laker to transition over to this way that JJ Redick wants to play. Anthony Davis, MVP candidate. You give him the ball more, you leverage his passing, you get him in more space. This guy is amazing, an amazing two-way player. Probably has been the MVP of the NBA through 4 games. He's been incredible defensively. He's everywhere. And yeah, his offense has been awesome. Austin Reaves, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura. Fun fact for Lakers fans out there, those 4 are in the most played four-man unit for the Lakers. He's not even leaning. LeBron has been playing more with different combinations of the bench, but the most consistent 4-man unit for the Lakers so far this year has been D'Lo, Reaves, Rui, and Anthony Davis. These guys have all been amazing. Austin Reaves especially has been incredible. But if you zoom in, they're moving the ball more. They're passing. They're top 5 in assists this season. They're probably not shooting as many threes as I'd imagine JJ Redick wants them to. They're still not very high. They're bottom 5 in the league right now in three points attempt per game. I'd assume that's going to go up, but do they have the personnel? I'm not sure how much that's on coaching versus how much that's on the personnel. I know Reaves and D'Lo are good shooters. Outside of that, they have a bunch of guys who like to operate inside the arc. Rui, LeBron, Anthony Davis.
Rui's a really good shooter. I think Rui's a good shooter. You don't think so?
I think he's a streaky shooter, and I think his preference, based on watching him, would be to operate from the mid-range and inside the arc. I think he's a willing shooter, and I do think he's a good shooter. I just maybe I'm being reductive here, nitpicking a little bit, but I do think he would prefer to operate inside the arc. Do you think that's wrong?
No, I think he would prefer. I think a lot of guys would prefer to operate within the arc. Like, I think we see that at such a consistent level in the NBA. It's really interesting. A lot of guys, and I think you and I have talked about this, a lot of guys love to perform inside the arc because you just get that consistent feedback of making the shot, right? Like, it's like you compare it to baseball. In baseball, the best players, succeed, let's say 32% of the time if you bat 320, in terms of, I'm not talking about plate appearances, but in terms of just at bats, let's say you bat 320, like you're still failing so often. Like, and that really seems to hurt players' psyches. When you're talking about a 3-point shooter, even if you're great, let's say you shoot 37% from 3 or something like that, you're a really, really good shooter, 38%, 39%, you're still missing so much more than you're making. Whereas within the arc, you probably feel like you'll just make it every time. For these players who practice it, I feel like a lot of these guys, when they practice like 15-footers, I'd imagine they don't miss in practice, like at all, almost ever. depending on the type of shot. So I can understand a lot of why these players, the Ingrams, the Hachimuras, these guys like that, they want to take mid-range shots, but I think it has to be stressed to them how important it is to be a spacer. And to that extent, like that's the biggest thing that I noticed from the Lakers is, like you mentioned, they're really down on in threes. And I expected JJ Redick, he is incorporating a lot more ball movement and player movement, and that's really visible to the eye when you watch them play. But 28th in the league in frequency of shots coming from three, and 30th in the league in frequency of corner 3-pointers, like that's way down. And I also think AD has been absolutely MVP level early on, but he's also not upped his 3-point volume yet. And I think we were expecting that. We saw the one preseason game where how many threes did he shoot in the first quarter? Like 7 or something like that?
Yeah, it was like 7. He was like 4 for his first 4, missed the next 3, and then stopped.
yeah, right, exactly. And we know there has been talk of JJ Redick encouraging him to shoot threes and all of that. And obviously he's been completely unstoppable offensively, but he's still super down in 3-pointers. Like we're talking 1.7 threes per 75. This is 4th percentile. That might be the lowest in his career in a while. Like I don't know. To me, they have some kinks to work out, and they have maybe some buy-in to work out. Like you said, it does seem like a lot of the players are buying into the ball and player movement. I think I'm assuming JJ Redick is really pushing 3-point shooting, and there may just not be some buy-in at this time, but maybe they'll get there. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's buy-in, or it could just be, I don't know. I mean, look, LeBron is going to be the driver of 3-point attempts, in my opinion. Not him shooting them. He is the greatest creator of threes in NBA history, almost by far. He, in terms of like a single force, we've never seen anyone ever create the types of threes he has. I'm just not sure what he's able to do. Like, he's still going to be a top, I don't know, 20 player, top 30. This is crazy that we're even having this conversation. He's still like a fringe all-star, but can he just like consistently drive offense that way? It's a tough thing to lean on. I think it's why it was perfect timing for their hiring of Redick, because you go from a guy like Darvin Ham, who didn't do much in terms of team offense and leaned a lot on LeBron, whether that's by design or whether that's just how LeBron likes to play, we'll never know. But I do think that there's light at the end of this tunnel now, because JJ Redick's going to infuse some of this team-friendly stuff that can create more optimal shot mapping. And I just think it's a weird balance right now, I guess is what I'm saying. You used a good word this offseason when talking about the Timberwolves. Clunky. I think right now it's a bit clunky, which is promising because they're 3-1 and could very well be 4-0 if LeBron didn't play whatever that game was last night. He just, it was not good. And the Suns played amazing. Like, the Suns played amazing. LeBron was not good, and the Lakers were right there at the end. They were up 4 halfway through the fourth quarter. I think Lakers fans should be very encouraged, even if I do find it a little bit clunky in terms of LeBron fitting in with the rest of this.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about that. So you made such a great point about kind of, and I'm scared to say this, but like, if LeBron is actually entering a mode of being not the greatest player in the world, obviously we know he's not the best in the NBA right now, but maybe outside of the top 20, outside of the top 30 potentially, if that is actually a transition that's happening, do the Lakers have enough to still be competitive? In my opinion, they don't. I don't think that they do. I think that they need this great LeBron, the LeBron that we saw, versus the Kings, the LeBron that we saw, in the first Suns game for parts of it, last night's or Monday night's Suns game. That's not going to cut it. I don't think they're going to be able to win anything like that. And if we see these kind of inconsistent performances or, a big kind of step back for LeBron in terms of his impact, I don't think the Lakers necessarily have enough to still be competitive in the West, the completely stacked West, where, there's just teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder who are running away with the league, in my opinion.
Can you expand on competitive? Like, do you think they're not even a playoff team, or do you mean like true contention?
I mean, like more than kind of scraping into the playoffs, maybe being like fighting to get into the 6 seed spot or like, being pushed out to like a play-in spot and then even winning a first round series.
This year's team needs LeBron to be really good, to be like a true contender. I don't think that's wrong, but I don't think that's. I would personally, I'm not a Lakers fan, so maybe it's easier for me to have this perspective than a Lakers fan. To me, that wouldn't worry me because LeBron's salary is so high. Of course, you need a guy making that kind of money to perform up to his salary. Like, if LeBron falls off a cliff, quote unquote, falls off a cliff this year and is merely good, and the Lakers can't contend because of that, I would just be like, well, yeah, of course, and they'll be fine. Like, I would be more encouraged by some of these other things. The thing that would discourage me most about that is they're wasting a really good season from Anthony Davis, who's now in his 30s. And who knows how many more of those Anthony Davis has, especially with his injury history. But I think LeBron will be good enough. I don't think he's going like I think last night was an outlier bad performance, and I think he will be good enough for them to. I don't think they're going to win the West. I think OKC is going to win the West, but I do think that they're going to be among the top 6 at the end of the season, assuming health.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, to me, I feel like a lot is on JJ Redick to make this work, and like I said, I've seen really encouraging things. Like you've talked about, you've done a bunch of great content on our Twitter feed about it. Lots of really encouraging things, but I do think that it's a lot to bear, and I feel like think about how good LeBron was last year, like an unbelievable year, in his age 39 season, and AD wasn't MVP AD, but he was excellent last year, incredible AD season, and he was healthy. And then think about where they actually ended up, like, and then we're talking about taking a, yeah.
You want to hear a fun fact, XJ?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a trivia question. So their starting lineup this year: D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reaves, Rui Hachimura, LeBron, Anthony Davis. Set a line or try to guess how many minutes that lineup played before January 15th, which is like half the season.
Last year?
Yeah.
How many minutes? Let's see. Darvin Ham.
It's a good start.
I don't know. Minutes? 100?
The answer is 0. They played 0 minutes together, which is one of the most insane things ever. They shared the court for 0 minutes. I think that Reaves and D'Lo's impact, and Rui, the three of them, I think their impact can make up for whatever regression we see from LeBron and then some. So to me, It's more about health, because I think Reaves is about to have a really big season. He's been incredible. Really, really good player. I think he can take on some of the tertiary creation. He'll never be LeBron. If he's LeBron, you guys can come get me. But he's never going to be LeBron as a creator.
Yeah.
But I think he's crafty. He's a good shooter. He's an underrated passer. I think him and Davis have really good chemistry. I think the really cool thing about him and D'Lo is they're almost interchangeable on and off the ball. They're both comfortable shooting off the catch. They both roam really well. They both can run some pick and roll. They both have nice chemistry with Davis. I think as LeBron scales back more and more, he's just so high IQ and still gifted. He's a fine enough shooter now. He's a really good screener, even though he was called for 3 moving screens last night. He's got to get that together. He can't be turning it over that way, but he's going to create advantages just simply as a screener because he's so lightning quick on the roll, such an elite passer on the short roll. Yeah, I think the Lakers actually have a number of options to move forward and be better than they were last season, even if LeBron regresses.
That's really interesting. That's really encouraging from the standpoint of Lakers fans. I think that's super encouraging to hear you say that. I think something that could determine this too is something that you kind of alluded to with talking about JJ Redick and the way that he was kind of addressing LeBron on the court. LeBron's basketball IQ being so high, effectively outlier level high in terms of his IQ and on-court abilities in that way. I wonder how he accepts a potential role change for him in terms of, people have talked about it for a while, being a super Draymond Green or being this kind of player who's more in an ancillary role and who is really there to increase the impact of his teammates without actually having the ball in his hands and doing everything himself. I wonder how willing he will be to accept that change, knowing that, I'm limited relative to how I have been earlier in my career, and this will be the best, for the team, given his complete astronomical basketball knowledge. That's something that I'm curious to see, and if he is starting to decline like more aggressively, how quickly will he make that shift? And I think that could potentially help the Lakers a ton, but that's an outstanding question in my opinion.
Absolutely, and the answer I'm about to give is totally intangible. There's no way for me to know this is true besides knowing people, which at the top of this podcast, I was talking about emoting as a human. So maybe who knows if I'm the best person to do this. I think this is an example of where JJ Redick would benefit from not being a possession perfectionist. And what I mean by that is you point to a possession where LeBron does his LeBron thing, where he like dribbles the ball and takes a freaking 1-step three or whatever. Like, there are just certain LeBron quirks that you have to live with season in, season out. I think he's more willing to buy in. He will be more willing to buy in if you take the foot off the pedal for a few possessions a game and let him just feel like he's still. I don't think he will. I think it's impossible to expect a guy who's achieved this individual and team success that he has, and the team success largely because he's played the way he has. He has gotten constant reinforcement for like 25 years that if he just is himself, there will be success. And I think it's impossible to ask a guy like that to be like, hey, that's great, but can you just like play off the ball 100 out of 100 possessions? And can you raise your Austin Reaves and D'Angelo Russell's impact by setting screens and spacing in the corner? I think he's more willing to buy into that team concept if he still is a driver of a certain amount of possessions. You just have to find a way to convince him that there's a middle ground here.
I think you're probably right from a, player psychology standpoint, but I guess the reason why I felt like LeBron might be different in that way is just I was talking about his basketball knowledge and just like his understanding. I sort of feel like it lends itself towards the idea that he may be just more willing to just like recognize that's how he can make the biggest impact on the game. And I think players have a hard time letting that kind of thing go, but I think if they're not doing well, I just could imagine him being more, I'm not saying like a level of humility, but just a level of understanding of like, well, I'm not at my level. Like the way I can impact the game is by playing in this way. And I think that JJ Redick's the best coach to potentially bring that out of him in terms of the mutual respect that they have for one another, in terms of JJ's willingness to get in his face or to confront him in ways. And in terms of his ability to kind of talk to LeBron on the side on a personal note and potentially get him to buy in or get him to think about things in that way. So I don't know. We'll see. To me, that's a big outstanding question for the Lakers, but I have liked what I've seen so far in terms of their offense, in terms of the fluidity of their offense. Definitely want to see them take and make more threes because that's not looking so hot so far. And maybe this is something we'll never see from AD, unfortunately, because he definitely seems to have the capacity to do it if he focused on that, but we're not really seeing it. So we'll see how that all develops, and it'll be really interesting, especially when LeBron misses games later in the season. That'll be interesting as well. So any final thoughts on the Lakers?
The guy said he's gonna play 82 games this year. You're doubting the king?
When's the last time LeBron played 82?
I can tell you the season. It was 2018.
Okay.
It was his last year. It was his last year in Cleveland, and he made a big thing of it. He was like, I'm gonna. Am I right? I hope I'm right.
So yes, you're right. 2018, you're correct. His age 33 season. So testing this brilliant encyclopedic memory, Geoff. When's the other time he's played 82 games? We're going back to trivia, I guess. So when?
Man, so it could be 2009. That because that's his highest impact season ever. That the
He
2008
played
2009
81
season.
games.
Fuck.
I'm sorry. I gotta, because I feel bad for what I did now. He's never played 82 aside from that one season.
Oh, okay. That's cruel. I came close.
I
came close though.
You came as close as you could have come to it. But I guess my point with that is he's played 22 seasons or 21 seasons and he's only done it once. I don't think he's going to do it in age 40. So I reiterate, when LeBron misses games, it'll be interesting to see how they play without him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on the Lakers?
No, I just, if you're a Lakers fan, you've made it this far, I would urge patience. I know you're a fan base that probably has not had to deal with that like Knicks fans had, but the Redick stuff, the early returns on that are great. And this was always going to be a transition post LeBron anyways. Like, you brought LeBron to win a championship. He won a championship. You want this season to go as good as possible, but I just hope that there's not the typical backlash for Redick, because there's just something cool about the newness that Redick's bringing to the league, the way his exuberance and enthusiasm for the sport. And yeah, I hope it remains positive despite whether they win a championship this season or it kind of goes the other way.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I we engage with a lot of Knicks fans, and obviously we understand the lack of patience in some cases, but I think you're making a great case for it. Yeah, this was a good conversation. Definitely got to explore some of these teams that are having some identity potentially challenges. I wouldn't go as far as to say crises, but maybe in the Knicks case I would. But yeah, I think this was really good. And if you are listening, if you made it this far, like Geoff said, why not give us a subscribe? Why not drop us a like? We are like, how many subs away from 1,000, Geoff? I think we're like
35
subs from 1,000. We should be able to get that within after this episode. So if you're watching it, please help us achieve that big milestone that we are really excited about. And tune into next week's episode. We're going to be dropping one of these every week. We're talking about different teams. Be lots of Knicks conversations, but lots of conversations about every team across the NBA. So any last words, Geoff, before you wrap it up?
No, just well said by you and well heard by me. And thanks to everyone for making this far. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks for Geoff. I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.